All right, we are back after a week.
I'm back.
After
we
a week
had
off.
A little week off for good reason.
Oh yeah.
I moved.
An unavoidable reason. I mean, that's one of the things everyone has to do in life.
Yes. It's the. It was a big move too. Moving with the Goyle.
Oh yeah.
I've never, at the ripe age of 40, never lived with a girlfriend before, and here we are. New experiences.
Yeah. Oh, it sure is. It sure is.
Which is a perfect week to talk about horror movies about moving.
Yes.
Because there's a crap ton of them. Like, it seems there's more of them than not.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say enough so to have its own little subgenre here. And it's not the horrors of moving. It's because that's a thing of its own.
The horrors of moving. Talk to my lower back. Oy. Yeah.
Just the horror that comes with moving. Potentially moving into a haunted house.
Where's the scariest place you've ever lived?
Scariest place I've ever lived? Probably the suburbs. Growing
up in the suburbs of Chicago.
Yeah,
we're talking like West Chicago here. It's pretty spooky out there.
Spooky.
This was only
we've lived,
like one Starbucks, right? Is that what got you?
This is way before Starbucks. This is when you like if you wanted coffee, you went to Dunkin'.
What was the old coffee shop down there in West Chicago? Would you just have to go to Omega or?
No, we had a no, we didn't have an Omega. We had a restaurant called Sandpiper.
Oh, okay. All right. I do know where that is. That Route 59?
Yeah. Sure is.
I feel like that then became an Omega. Am I crazy?
I don't know.
I never associated Omega being out there too, but
you had one in Downers Grove, right?
We did, and I thought that was a one-off, but then I remember being in your neck of the woods and seeing another one and being like, I didn't realize
there was a change.
Well, yeah, they had the best hobo banquet around is at Omega. Shout out to Omega. Not sponsored by Omega, but they got
I'd love to be sponsored by. Would love it.
That would be nice. Hey, they had the best free rolls too. If they want to just send us rolls to give them that shout out.
We will work for rolls. Bread
rolls. How about when you were a kid? What's your most stark memory about moving? Did you pretty much have your entire childhood in the same home, or was there any point?
No. We moved. I'd say I have 3 different childhood homes. One that I don't remember. I was too young. I think we moved out at 4. Don't remember much about that house. The next house was probably the most secluded. It was like on an acre, maybe, and some change. We had a ton of trees, so it felt, it felt certainly when you were a kid like scary to go outside at night and like have a ton of trees around you. And then the next house was like in a subdivision where they had like specific rules, like no fences, no sheds. Real weird stuff. I mean, that's scary alone when you've got like a neighborhood who all decides on the same stuff.
Yeah. Interestingly, I also moved around the age of 5 from Wheaton to Downers Grove, where I spent most of my, youths. But I remember that move starkly. I don't remember living in Wheaton at all up till 5, but I remember that move. It really made an impression on me. And I remember because I had my own room for the first time, and they just tossed the mattress on the ground, and I feel like I slept on the mattress on the ground for quite some time. But I do remember one morning waking up to within like the first week of living there, a big old spider on my face.
Ooh, on your face?
And on my face, waking up to a big old spider at the age of 5 on my face. It shaped me.
I was going to say, do you have a phobia of spiders now?
No, actually, okay. I don't. I'm more scared of snakes than spiders.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. Snakes and alligators.
I think my scariest spot was that first apartment in LA of mine that you actually saw.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that literally opened up, the windows opened up into like a courtyard where like a Latina family was constantly partying out there. So I had like the view of them partying 24/7 on the first floor. Tons of roaches. The property manager himself was so scary. At one point, he slipped a note under my door saying, "I know what you're doing in there. I know you're running a big pot racket or something." And he was wrong. There was none of that. I went to his door immediately, like half in tears. "What are you saying? I'm not doing anything like this."
He felt in trouble.
And then he apologized. And then he wanted me to come in for beers, and it felt like a trap. It felt creepy and weird.
No thanks.
That place, I got out of there within a year, because that was,
what part of LA was that again?
That was Kingsley. That was right off of Fullerton. I was a couple doors down from Lucille Ball's old mansion.
Okay.
But it was, right when it starts to get scuzzy, where the hills kind of stop and you're rolling into the dollar store Sunset area. I think that was definitely my scariest joint, mostly just based on the sheer amount of cockroaches.
It's funny. It's usually people that make things scary. Neighbors, crazy neighbors, or
the property manager there was a nut. He was definitely a nut. I don't know what he was talking about, and personally, I think he might have had a crush on me. It's very possible.
He could have, He got you. His note was his Trojan horse. He got into your head, into your space with his note, and then you went to confront him, and you wanted to. He was like the Hansel and Gretel. You almost got Hanseled and Greteled.
It felt that way. It really did. I kept the letter because it's so next level bonkers. Anyways, I'm happy with the new place, though. This is my laboratory. My own personal laboratory in here for the podcasting and the gaming and the music and all that stuff. So, in that sense, this has not been a horrific move. I'm excited for new chapters.
That's great. I mean, that's the most interesting thing about moving. Let's just start there. The most interesting thing about moving is that you see a space, a place, and you have you like it, but you have no idea what you're truly getting yourself into. Maybe within the first week, you start to meet people or find the weird creaks and noises of the space. You don't get all that stuff up front. I mean,
right.
That sort of is why I think it is so ripe for the horror genre, is that, you're in a new space that is supposed to be safe, welcoming, comforting. And it can be the complete opposite.
That's very true. And just like why you need to move has such significance too. Are you moving for a job? Are you moving for a new relationship?
Career.
Are you running away from someone, from something? Are you trying to start anew? Or are you trying to, as we'll talk about in like Mulholland Drive, become a big shot? Like essentially when I first moved out to LA, big dreams and all that stuff. And then what happens as reality starts to sink in, and the place that you saw as one thing becomes more of a reality.
Yeah, and it can really get into your mind. It can really mess with who you are.
That's true.
I think that was my experience in LA. It was so different from the Midwest. The people were different. Everyone was out there for their own reasons. But the majority of them, success, and so it was kind of unsettling for me. It's like no one was there. It was super
surreal out there, coming from the Midwest.
Yeah.
And I did notice a stark difference between those that migrated like us versus those that were inherent to, especially LA.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. It's just a different mentality when you grow up here and you have seasons, and especially in Chicago, extreme heat, extreme cold.
Extreme
it really
seasons,
does something to your psychology, and I think it does something to your capacity to write stories, to think about storytelling and narratives, and to dissect, versus only having 72-degree weather your entire year. I don't think it's going to give you that same sort of like a dynamism when you're thinking and being critical of film even or TV.
Sure.
That deals with moves. So I think we have a unique perspective when we talk about these movies about moving.
Absolutely. And what you just said there about, extreme weather really sort of sets the stage for this, for our first film here, which is 1980s Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Before we were born, 2 years older than us.
Yeah. You have a man, Jack Torrance, who is moving his family out there for a career opportunity, to stay at the Overlook in the off season, which, I mean, may have seemed like a good idea, but I don't know if that's a good idea to move your family out there and
I mean, on paper, if you're trying to do it, he wanted to write a novel, right? He's going out there specifically to write a novel. He's moving from, if you remember their apartment, this little crap hole, right? To a hotel. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
like this luxury hotel, complete
mansion, if you will.
antithesis. It's unique in terms of our list here. And then you
Right.
go from such a little small place to such a ginormous place. And granted, it's a different kind of move. It's a temporary move, right?
Right.
Because he's expected to leave once the season begins again. If I recall correctly.
You're
Doesn't he
absolutely
leave?
right. You're absolutely correct. And this is probably one of the best examples, I mean, of our list of, a space. Well, I will say this. The common thread in almost all of these movies is that the new location is a major character.
Right.
And the Overlook Hotel is not just, one character. It's loaded with, spirits or whatever you want to call them. Enough to make a man want to murder his own family.
Right. I mean, we can't bury the lead here and talk about how ultimately it's alive because it used to be it's a burial ground of Indians, right? Of native peoples.
Correct. Indigenous people.
North America. I think probably it wasn't as politically correct as Stephen King's first. Was he using PC language?
I don't
like
believe
that
so.
then?
I don't think he was really writing within any limits.
And he hated it. He hates this adaptation. It's
He
his
hates
most
this adaptation.
abhorred of all of his adaptation. Do you
So
have
much-
context for that?
Well, Stanley Kubrick took a lot of liberties, made it his own. So much so as to Stephen King approved that made-for-TV remake in the 1990s starring Steven Weber from Wings, and was more happy with that version than this masterpiece that Kubrick created.
Have you seen the newer one, the TV movie one?
Yeah, I remember when it aired on television, and I remember it just didn't seem as scary. It was on like CBS,
I mean, the guy from Wings isn't very ominous either.
He's hilarious. The guy is hilarious.
Yeah, no, he's definitely more
and I think
associated
that
with
may have
comedy.
been the thing that people really couldn't get past. Was his comedic?
Yeah, his best movie is Sour Grapes. I don't know if you caught that one.
Oh yeah, that's a Larry David's movie. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, The Shining, I think, is probably the best of all the movies we're talking about. It's interesting that we're talking about that one first. Granted, it's the oldest, but in terms of production value, it's number one. And in terms of just scare factor between the twins, between Jack Nicholson losing his mind and talking to the bartender, those scenes are just so poignant. It's a movie you can rewatch over and over again. I feel
absolutely.
Compared to a lot of these other ones, I mean, I've seen most of these on the list, and I went back and was rewatching some, and I don't feel like they're as not even remotely close to rewatchable, with the exception of maybe Sinister, as The Shining was. And that's interesting because The Shining is about a writer as Sinister. As well.
Right. Well, before we get to that, I want to talk about our next movie because you would see a lot of similarities here as well in Poltergeist, 1982 Poltergeist, a subdivision also buried over, a burial ground of indigenous people. And this too was set up with a man moving his family into a new development because he's so successful within the architectural design world that I believe they're like creating a new community, and his boss is insistent on them, living in one of these homes. But I think within like the first week, I forget how long it takes within The Shining for Jack to start noticing things aren't,
that's a good question.
Yeah, but I think in
I
Poltergeist,
think it kind of happens pretty quick because isn't it partitioned based on like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
Yeah.
I think it happens pretty quick there for him.
I'd say the biggest difference within Poltergeist and The Shining, though, is, well, obviously the family not going, crazy and turning on each other, but the Poltergeist start off real cutesy. They start off with like, hey, we moved the chair from over there to over there, and then it gets, we're taking
at
your
first
daughter.
His wife is in awe of it. And I don't know. I'm gonna give a shout out to her because the female lead in the first Poltergeist is hilarious. She's a really fun actress.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned, so Craig T. Nelson then was a big shot architect, because I know in the remake with Sam Rockwell, he has recently lost his job, and he comes into this film and this haunting like really down and out compared to Craig T. Nelson, who's kind of this,
Well, yeah, the start of Poltergeist. I mean, the music is all upbeat, like even like an iconic scene in The Shining. You have Jack Torrance driving his family and talking about cannibalism, about the Donner Party, and the music is still like very sinister. But Poltergeist starts off really like upbeat, family moving into a
like didn't you say Spielberg was a producer on this, so kind of had that family fun charm at first, and that he might have had something to do with it.
So here's what happened with Poltergeist. So Steven Spielberg wrote this almost as a sequel to his Close Encounters. Now, like with almost like creating like this horror like universe, kind of like what James Wan did. And the reason he wasn't able to direct this movie is because he was signed on, he'd already started E.T. And I don't think he was able to do it. So he hired Tobe Hooper. His success, you have Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Funhouse. He did both of those movies before this. And Tobe Hooper was signed kind of like a puppet. Like he set up the shots. Spielberg came in and sort of like ghost directed this. Like he would do things, but he pretty much, from what I understand, was the real director on this movie, and just needed Tobe Hooper to be the name on it.
It's really interesting that you mentioned how it really does start cutesy, but I almost think that the cutesy stuff, where essentially these spirits are like batting around like a cat toy, is scarier than when they get really ominous.
Sure. Sure.
When they're being like mentally messed with is somehow more frightening to me than when they go full on. Let's bring in the ghost detectors or whatever. Which the lady who's the paranormal investigator. Oh my gosh, she's amazing.
Clean.
She's just so iconic.
I forget her name. Zelda is a real
scary.
As a kid, I do, and it's interesting. It may not have been like the actual like white noise of the television or the lights and the creature that comes out of the closet. It was more about them using like the home, like, and using the clown doll and like the tree is tapping on. And there's moments there that I did find scary, but you rewatch it as an adult over and over again. It's not. It's more just like a fun. Yeah.
How about the remake? How'd you feel about the remake?
I didn't love it.
In 2015.
Didn't love it, and I'm a huge Sam Rockwell fan.
Me too.
Not a very good remake.
It missed the mark. It just felt they start to feel stock with, especially in these mid-teens, all these remakes of such classic horror. It just felt like, why are you doing this?
Right.
It's so repetitive, a lot of them. It drove me crazy. Where do we jump to from Poltergeist?
From Poltergeist, we could jump to House, which was no, wait, you know what? We're skipping over the original Amityville.
Okay, now, 1979. That's actually the premiere. You're right.
This falls before The Shining. This comes out before The Shining, and the Amityville.
Roland and Kidder, these are top dogs at the time.
Absolutely, and this story, is still, supposed to be based off of a real life experience, real life event. And without this movie, we don't get like the James Wan universe either, I don't think. With like Insidious but this movie, do you remember a lot about it? I remember not loving it as much as a kid because it felt very, very adult, and maybe it's because of the actors I didn't really know at the time.
I remember more with the remake, which is not very good itself. Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds.
The most interesting about that is just the whole angle with him being the stepdad, the aspect of that where he can't be like a paternal figure that is comforting in a way. Mm-hmm. He's always detached, and that's another thing that keeps popping up in all these is kind of these single moms or these mothers that have kids where the actual father is not around. And that's one of the more interesting aspects of Amityville, I feel like, is how Ryan Reynolds is trying to balance figuring out what's going on with these kids and what's going on with the house simultaneously.
Right.
But if I'm honest with you, I don't remember the 79 version super well.
I've seen it a handful of times. It's one of those movies I don't really go back to. I just think if you're looking at this genre, it might be one of the first ones and maybe most recognizable, but it's still not necessarily my favorite. You do have Brolin kind of like a Jack Torrance character, though. I mean, I don't know as far as release dates come out here, but I mean, Brolin's got an axe in that movie too, and
that's interesting. Yeah, because it was technically the year before, but I'm assuming. Yeah, Shining was being filmed simultaneously,
and it may have been in the book. So maybe the Amityville took that from the Shining book. I don't know.
I do like the look of it, though. I will say, especially like as I revisited the first half, and just like the shots are really nice. Like it's almost like pleasant and pastoral the way that it was filmed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that took away from the spook factor for me too, because I was too preoccupied with the cinematography.
Could be.
Do you like these ones that are supposedly based on true stories or that are rooted in the true story? Because ultimately it was a house where actual murders had occurred, but then you have the couple moving in there that are then influenced by those spirits that were killed in the house.
Right.
Classic haunted house scenario.
I think the allure there was because the success of The Exorcist that came out here, and I think this was based off a true story. It really gets under people's skin knowing that something like this could have really happened. But I don't get necessarily excited. I don't buy into it too much when I see that at the very start of a movie based on actual events. I don't know. I think I get.
It turns me off. I feel like it's going to hamper. Horror,
Yeah, it may not go. Yeah, I completely agree. It may not go to those places that you want to in a horror movie. It's more of a thriller than when you see that.
I don't know. Oh, I did like Melissa George. She's good in everything.
Yeah.
She was in the remake and she's a horror like goddess. If you ask me, she knows what she's doing.
And I don't think we really buy into. I mean, Ryan Reynolds' performance was fine, but I don't think people like him as a villain.
No, I don't think so either.
He's too charming. Too charming to be evil. Sorry, Ryan.
Weird zone where he wasn't quite a big shot yet, like like he is now. I would say it was kind of like people were waffling on him. I feel like in this stage, this role helped him pick off as soon as he otherwise.
I think maybe he needed it to break away from his romantic comedy look.
Yeah, the goof, the Van Wilder stuff.
Yeah,
around then too. Yeah, that does make sense. What else do we got here?
Well, House is one of those movies that I remember as a kid just loving. And this is a movie about a guy who has an aunt who passes away and leaves him this gorgeous home on this quiet street. He moves there. He's also a writer. Writing novels, and I think people get excited when they find out he's moving back to his family roots. He moves his son there. I think he's a widower. I forget if it's divorce or widower.
Who's the lead?
William Catt. William Catt, you might know from the original Carrie movie, but if you were a fan of 80s shows, he was the star of The Greatest American Hero, which is the song we get in on Seinfeld, Believe It or Not, I'm walking on air, and George changes the song. Right. So yeah, he was a TV star, and I think he was also looking for more major roles. His next door neighbor is played by George Wendt, who was killing it on Cheers at the time, so they needed him as his next door comedic relief. But yeah, he notices that this house is haunted. Weird things start happening, and then the house itself takes his son. And kind of like Poltergeist, it's kind of like your haunted house. I don't want to compare it to The Shining because he's a writer, but I would say it's maybe like Amityville, that the house is like this alive creature meets Poltergeist in the sense that he's got to find his son back. It's more of a horror comedy, though. I would classify it as. And
Wendt's in it, although Wendt does not steer away from horror, because I remember he was in one really disturbing Masters of Horror episode where he skins people. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
He's not scared to run the gamut there.
No, he's a great actor. But mostly known for Norm.
True.
Very fun movie though. They made some sequels, and in the sequel, they pull another Cheers character in as the comic relief. He's the postman in this as well. It's Cliff from Cheers. Yeah, Dan Ratzenberger. Yeah.
Oh, he's so great.
Yeah.
Story.
Very very fun, ridiculous set of films.
I haven't seen that one. It sounds really familiar to me. For some reason, House slipped under my radar back in the 80s.
Yeah, it's a good one. I could see them remaking that one day and it being like, yeah, I could see that.
Where do we jump all the way then to? I'm trying to look at. There's none from the 90s here on our list. Right, we jump immediately all the way up to Mulholland Drive.
Yeah, and there may have been some ones we're forgetting or letting slip through the trap.
That's true. It's quite possible. But I did rewatch Mulholland Drive recently. It's one of those movies you can watch 1,000 times and still not quite know what's going on, but that's I think part of the horror in it. Yeah. And you have this actress or wannabe actress from Nebraska who arrives in LA. She's moving into her aunt's apartment in Los Angeles that is empty while she's away on her own vacation. And then everything spins out of control from there when she finds this woman who doesn't remember
Rita
who's been in a car crash. Rita. Rita, yes.
Because she sees the name on the poster, Rita Hayworth's name on the poster.
Okay, is it David Lynch that we're talking about here?
Oh yeah, so
where do you stand on David Lynch? Is he profound or is he
love David Lynch.
Like cracked up? Like part of me sees what he's going for. I'm just not sure. I almost worry it's like too convoluted for normal audiences to really appreciate. I know Mulholland Drive has its lovers. It's considered a classic film. And I see why, but even every time I watch it, I feel like I have to do a little Google research to that's right. That's what's going on right now because it's so insane. But the horror involved here is essentially what we were talking about earlier with how LA can chew people up and spit them.
Right.
And LA itself, moving to LA more so than moving to a house, moving to a city here in a grander sense is really the villain. And essentially how all these actresses are interchangeable, really, because if you remember, who's our lead actress in this again? It's not Natasha.
No,
she's the girl from The Ring.
I know. Naomi Watts.
Naomi Watts, yes. Yeah. So Naomi Watts ultimately plays at least 2 different characters in it, if not 3. Yeah. And then Rita is multiple characters too. And it seems all like this like deal with the devil thing is going on. To become I think that's it. A Hollywood starlet, you have to sell your soul. And it's almost like this loop will happen and all these women are just absolutely interchangeable. And do you remember the box, the blue box in it, the mystery of the blue box? Mm-hmm. What's in the blue box? I think that's just the emptiness of like getting what they want there, and to be the fame and the adoration is this hole, this nothingness, this void that they're trying to fill that will always be empty, dark blackness of nothingness. You know, that is like serious existential horror we're talking about. And Lynch is really like pointing to those who need this sort of adoration being empty vessels themselves, you know?
Right. I think that's a fair assessment.
Really tragic. It's like we talked about before that it's a really hard movie to talk about. I'm probably missing the mark in some ways, but I think like that's part of the point. I don't think he wants it to be fully understood too, the way that it moves and the way that all these actors are playing these rotating characters.
Sure.
And it is very cyclical in nature, and how it's just the nonstop destruction of innocence is what I saw going on there.
No, I think
like the cowboy is the cowboy the devil, because there's this cowboy character in there. And then of course you got Justin Theroux as this director too, which
also is the devil.
Yes, they're all like devils to each other in this weird way.
I think that's it. You know,
with one another, they're either being subjugated to horrors or being the one causing the horrors. So Thoreau's got a fun part though as that director. I mean, he's kind of the one thing that keeps it a little levitated, you know, a little bit of levity through
Sure.
his Hollywood
That's
persona. But yeah, honestly, I think if we're talking existential movie horror, Mulholland Drive can't be beat. And Justin, why do you think they chose Mulholland Drive? Granted, that's where the party is on it, that's where the crash occurs. But do you remember driving on Mulholland Drive yourself when you were out there?
not really.
Okay, I do.
Yeah.
And I know it's kind of like a sneaky way to get from the valley to the actual LA, the city, Hollywood zone, Los
Right.
Feliz. But it's very meandering, it's very long, and it's very dangerous too.
Well, don't you think?
To me,
Don't you
it's-
think that's the
yeah.
metaphor of what they're doing? Is they're going down this path to try to get ahead?
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the actual road itself and the way that it's actually designed in the real world is analogous to what's going on with these characters and
Yeah, dangerous.
ultimately to what goes on with those who go out there not knowing how corrupt it is out there and how, you know, power squashes those that don't know what they're getting themselves in for, you know?
Right.
Like you don't know what's coming around any turn when you go out there. And no, it's
I think you nailed
too
that.
powerful.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't. Yeah, it's too powerful. And like I don't know. It's one of those films that like I'm gonna have to watch every 5 years because I don't know what the fuck's going on still. What I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's I think there's probably buried within that movie or like the 7 deadly sins as well.
Yes, I think you're right. I definitely think
greed
you're right.
and
It is biblical, and another one I want to talk about later is Mother, which has very, very biblical stuff going on in it too.
Right.
Forgot to.
I think we jump now to Dark Water.
Dark Water. Have you seen both versions? Because we had the 2002 Japanese version.
No.
In 2005, we have it with
Jennifer
Girl
Connelly.
from Labyrinth.
Right? Jennifer Connelly.
Miss Connelly, indeed.
Yeah. Oh man, I always had a crush on her.
I watched the 2002 version this week, and I remember I did the same with Pulse. We were talking about Pulse, these ones that have been remade from Japan, and I gotta say, Dark Water is good, is really good, the Japanese version. And I remember not really liking the American version with Connelly and John C. Reilly, who usually can do no wrong.
John C. Reilly, isn't Tim Roth's in there too? I believe.
Yes. The Japanese version really has a different feel to it, and it's much more ominous. And again, we have this mother who's essentially trying to provide for her daughter, going through a divorce here. Is she going through the divorce in the Connelly version too?
Yes, she's going through a divorce. She's also looking to get her daughter into like a good school, I believe. So that's depicting where she's going to move.
Is there custody issues going on in the Connelly version too?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. In the way we talked about the existential. Just like meaning having being fallacious, like totally it's a fallacy meaning itself in Mulholland Drive. This one has more of that depressive angle and mental health angle, and how this dark water that's seeping in through her ceiling really is metaphoric for her inability to take care of herself, let alone her own kid.
Yeah,
because it's a crappy apartment to begin with, right? It's not that great, and the poor girl like loves the mother, but she's not going to have the best life with her compared to her dad, and the warring that goes on between them, especially in the Japanese version, is pretty profound, because you can tell that the father like feels for the mother and wants to let her like be the guardian because he doesn't have the same sort of relationship, but at the same time is actually scared for his daughter's well-being.
Doesn't the little girl have an imaginary friend too? Is that in the Japanese version?
I can't remember.
Okay, I think that's
don't recall. Well, it's not an imaginary friend. It's the girl who's ultimately causing the dark water, who's in the tank on the ceiling. Which I don't know if you've seen. There's this new Netflix, not new, it was a couple years ago, or maybe last year, which is a real documentary about this crazy girl who then
in Los Angeles
in the tank on top
Skid
of the
Row.
hotel. herself, and everyone was comparing it to these dark waters.
Yeah, they were like getting creeped out by like the elevator stuff and the
the
actual water being tainted from her body being in it, which
right,
is just
everyone's drinking corpse water. But I gotta give that Japanese version credit, because while it's not the scariest, it was really deep. Like it had a lot going on for it.
All right.
And I feel like in terms of film criticism, it could definitely be tackled in a way probably this kindly one steered toward the masses can't.
Gotcha. Have you seen Haunting in Connecticut?
Yes, I have seen Haunting in Connecticut. You said, you liked it, right? You think it's fun?
Yeah, and I actually had the chance to interview the director, Peter Cornwell, on Set in Horror when I was doing that interview show.
Oh, that's right. I recall that. That's right.
Yeah, this is another movie based off of a real story, right? Or a book that was based off of a real story. So this was somewhat adapted. The interesting thing about this one, and you think this would be more of a common thread, is that they're moving for the son who has cancer into a new area home, try to get a fresh start. And
well, this is interesting because when I was watching it, I was confused if they were moving or if they were just renting this place temporarily because it was closer to the hospital,
the treatment,
because then you see the husband, he goes back and he's watching the family videos at their other home, but I think they just moved so quick they weren't able to actually put their old home on the market.
That's a good question. I was always under the impression they were purchasing, which is also a common thread of like, why don't you just move? It's just another reason the family's always trapped to that because of just, like the economy we live in. You get sort of trapped when you make a large purchase.
Yeah, from because I watched it this week. From what I recall, I remember it being more of we're renting this joint while he continues to have to go to the house.
All right.
Because I know they kept going back to the other house, or at least the dad does.
Yes, the dad definitely is.
Yeah. I don't remember them talking about needing to sell that house, but he sold his car to pay for the rent for this new place.
Okay.
But what I do like is the basement and ultimately what had happened in this house. I feel like is a different angle than other haunted houses.
Yeah.
With the whole necromancy aspect of it and the carving into the skin was unique.
Absolutely.
What other insights did you get from that interview?
I think it was like the thing I like the most about it is how Peter, it was the questions I was having, like, how did you find this house? And when you found this house, how did you know it was the right house for your haunted house? And, we really talked about how, like, bringing a house into a film and making it a character really works, and colors and the things you can do. And I really think that James Wan does a great job of doing that and bringing like a really good color palette in, and which I think will really help with the atmosphere. I
did like the atmosphere. There was a couple cheesy moments, obviously, before it's going to happen. And I'm got mixed feelings about Virginia Madsen as our lead here. How do you feel about Miss Madsen?
I agree. I love her. I usually really like her. I mean, ever since like Candyman, and
of course, yeah.
I think I agree with you. Just maybe as the mother, it didn't necessarily click for me.
Yeah, it might be because in Candyman, she's more of like a independent woman, right? And she's going to school. She's trying to write her thesis or whatever. But in this one, I didn't necessarily believe her and her son's relationship. I felt like it was a little stilted. But I do like the kid who does play her son, Kyle Gallner.
Yeah,
he in the new Scream is the Scuzz bucket at the top. Like, is the first one to get killed that we've talked about.
Yeah, he's great. I didn't
realize at the time. I was like, this guy's so familiar. And then you see that he's a horror dude. He's been in some horror, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
He does have kind of a sinister look to him, though, doesn't he?
Oh yeah. I think that definitely works for him. As soon as you own that, and then like lean into it and make that is like your choice now. And you might get typecast, but it might really work for you.
I think he was actually probably the scariest part about it when he starts to turn and starts to get affected by the spirits there and kind of messes with his own siblings.
I agree. Yeah.
That was scary to me. I mean, we talked about some of these haunted house ones not being all that scary, but this actually did have moments that were kind of, beyond the pale. That actually got me like, ugh, God. Sure. I expected it to be that bad. I mean, granted, I feel like at the end it gets a little loosey-goosey, but certainly like mid-second act, entering that third act, I actually was like, all right, you're doing some things right here, Haunting. That was 2009.
That was 2009, yes.
Then we kind of move into a big wave of all of this like house horror.
Yeah, a wave of James Wan universe happening here.
Yeah, let's start talking about your boy here with Insidious 2010, because I love Rose Byrne. I love Rose Byrne. And I like parts of this movie. I like parts of Insidious. I guess who's the main dude? He's also in Conjuring. He's in
Patrick
all
Wilson.
these horror
Patrick Wilson.
I feel like he's never really making a character, and I'm always watching Patrick Wilson. Like Tom Cruise, like it's always him.
Okay.
That kind of drives me nuts, and I don't really find him paternal. And when he's in Insidious, he's specific with Rose Byrne having this kid who's getting sucked into the astral plane, dealing with. I do like the design of the demon, even though it does look a lot like that Star Wars one from Phantom Menace. What is that? Darth Maul.
Darth Maul.
It looks a little Darth Maul-y to me.
Yeah, the red and black. For sure.
Which kind of takes away some of the spook factor.
So the family moves into this house, I think, just for a new opportunity, right? I don't think there's anything aside from them just like wanting to like move into a new house,
which is kind of nice, right? There's no like new job or running away from stuff,
right?
Yeah, right. It's just okay. We're moving. That's that.
We're growing our family. Let's move in here. I really like the screenwriter a lot, Lee Wynell. You might know from Saw. I believe he wrote all the Insidious movies, but he's done a ton. I really like his screenwriting. He also plays a character in the movies as the one of the ghost hunters.
Oh, okay. Yes, when we get to that ghost hunter stuff, doesn't it feel like too poltergeisty, where we're dealing with the same sort of thing?
I definitely think it feels like an homage, or they're just straight up borrowing from there. I didn't hate it though, because
even and The Conjuring then becomes about those people, right?
Yes,
becomes more about them than those being haunted.
The Conjuring is about a couple who definitely deal with, and that's also supposed to be based off of true stories. The Conjuring, the couple who those were written about, and I think that also ties into the Amityville.
That's not James Wan, though, is it? Conjuring?
Yes.
It is. Okay. I think The Conjuring is a much stronger movie than Insidious.
I think so, too. I think so, too.
And even the sequel, I remember being pretty good to The Conjuring. Conjuring 2, I think, was pretty darn good.
I agree.
It's interesting, because let's backtrack a little bit here and talk about Sinister. Because Sinister is another one that has a great sequel, if you ask me, too. Sinister 2 is almost as good as Sinister. Not quite as good, but it does more dynamic things, I guess. But Sinister, to me, next to The Shining, is probably the scariest on this list.
Yeah, in fact...
Where do you sit on that?
No, I agree. And in fact, I mean, there is now actual science proving how scary this movie is. Have you seen any of those studies where they've actually... started testing heart rates on people, and as far as an audience goes, The Sinister may be one of the scariest movies of all time based on those numbers.
I believe it. Even rewatching it, even though I know what was going to happen, I think a lot of it has to do with the sound mixing, the sound effects that goes on while he's watching these reels. Is just so haunting and like it gets under your skin. Yeah. And I think a lot of it has to do with that. It takes such a simple concept of the boogeyman, right? And then puts the most sinister spin on that you could imagine. This child eater. We're watching a film about a character who's a horror writer himself, a true crime writer,
Right.
who's
Right.
like ultimately getting sucked into the film in the same way we're getting sucked into the film that he's the star of. And Ethan Hawke is hit or miss for me, but in this he was just so perfect. I think a lot of it had to do with what makes it so scary is the reel to reel stuff, and the difference between watching something digitally and watching something projected. Because there's a lot of scenes where he himself has the film projected on him. And if you remember, the kids always get sucked into the movie. So it was kind of like prefacing, you become the movie. When you're watching something that's that impacting, it is you. You know what I mean? You are lost to it. It owns you. And the way that Bagul then is able to dominate these children into slaying their families.
Yeah, and I think
and the way they do it,
a lot of credit goes to Scott Derrickson, the director. I mean, I think I don't know if you had seen his movie he did before this, The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Oh, I did see that. Yes.
Yeah, it's one of the better, exorcism movies, in anything that comes out after The Exorcist. But
well made. I would have recast it, but well made.
Sure. And I think he did a really great job with this, and I'm really excited for his collaboration with Ethan Hawke again in the Black Phone.
Oh yeah, that does look scary as well.
I really think that this guy gets horror.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's the don't show too much approach that he does throughout the majority of it, where we're just getting these little glimmers of what Bagul looks like in the water, in the footage, just in the mirror. You don't actually see what he is, and then when you do toward the end, it's horrifying. And it's not like overdone. It's not an overdone character. It's kind of like melty white face, almost looks like a rocker in a weird way, the way his hair is down, but it's somehow really, really scary. And the second one is really good too. Do you remember the second one?
I don't remember. I've only seen the second one time, and I know I want to rewatch it. And I'm already starting to build my list of what do I want to rewatch for Halloween season this year. Yes. And I'm definitely rewatching the Sinister movies because I
put it on there. I think it's Shannon Zossaman's best movie. I think she's kind of underrated. She's again, we have this mother of two kids, and she's kind of trying to escape her past, and that's why she's holding up in this house that ultimately then is haunted by Bagul. But it's the environment is much more exciting, I think, than being stuck in the house with Ethan Hawke, even though the claustrophobia there is palpable. Yeah, this is more at a farmhouse. You get more outdoor shots, and it doesn't detract at all. I feel like it makes it a different kind of scary, that Bagul isn't just confined to the house. He's confined to the whole area around it, and the way that he moves, in the way Bagul works, I think, is fascinating and something that hasn't been done before. In the way that, like, it's not one house; it's like he gets the family hooked, if you will, and then the next house they're in is when he'll have the kid slay the family. Right. So that he's corrupt. It's like a disease. Bagul's like a disease hopping from house to house, which is something I hadn't seen before. I don't know. The idea of it following I think it's probably the scariest contemporary film out there.
Yeah. I think
I don't know if it's close to it.
Why can't I think of what? Oh gosh, the hidden cam. I'm gonna have to look this up. Why can't I think of it? It was definitely on something we were talking about yesterday, as far as like a family moving into a house and then like everything. Paranormal Activity. Gosh, I don't know. I couldn't think of that.
Yes.
Paranormal Activity plays with the idea of evil sort of following. It's not the house that's haunted. It's almost like the family. Right, the family that's haunted and that moves into follows them.
Right.
I think Sinister did it better. Because we're just playing with low budget horror with Paranormal Activity, but I love that idea. I mean, and I guess Insidious is also like that. The boy becomes,
it does follow him in Insidious. You're right.
Yes.
What I especially also like about Sinister is this is kind of a trope, but they always make it seem like one of the kids is going to be the problem, and it turns out to be the other kid. It kind of happens in Dark Skies, if you remember. You think it's this is the kid that's going to be abducted by the aliens. They do a nice red herring thing in Sinister with that, where you think it's going to be the son who's the problem child and drawing with markers on his school board, people hanging. Like he's the one being affected by it, but of course it's the one you don't expect, the little Goyle.
It always is. It always is. Where do we go from?
I want
from there?
to talk now. Oh no, let's. You mentioned 13 Cameras because I haven't seen this one.
Oh yeah, 13 Cameras takes a different approach. You know, the thing I really liked about this for our list, because you know it's an okay movie. It's something I would say, well, if you're looking for something to watch, like stream it. It's more what you kind of described with your first experience in LA. It's about your interaction with the landlord. Like you're moving into someone's house. You're borrowing. It's not your home. You're just there temporarily. And this movie's about a couple who is having, you know, they're having some relationship issues, and they move into a new home. And also very similar to another movie I think we watched at the beginning of the year called Aftermath.
Oh my god!
Yeah. In the sense
with
that
Sean
we're
Ashmore.
not really. That guy's and everything. We're looking at a couple that moves into a house that's not haunted. They might have that feeling that it might be, but they're being watched. They're being watched by the landlord, the owner, and he is beyond creepy. He's beyond creepy. He sneaks in and out of the house. Like, I won't give anything away if you do want to watch it, but I really like that for our list. Not everything needs to be haunted. It's just an uneasy feeling. You're in a home. And you have this uneasy feeling. How are you supposed to sleep?
Psycho in this. There's nothing supernatural.
Yeah.
He's got the creepy ass landlord who's doing nefarious shit. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That was 2015. Jump 2 years ahead. You got Mother. You've seen Mother, right? Darren Aronofsky is one of my favorite directors of all time.
He is. That's interesting. Well, that explains Black Swan.
Yes.
Well,
I like
Black Swan
better than Mother.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember this time I was working at a Catholic school. And I told the other English department people, I was like, oh, I just saw Mother there at the lake in Oak Park. It was amazing. I just absolutely adored it. A couple of them went and saw it, and they're like,
what is wrong with you?
Yes, because really it does run through a lot of Old Testament sort of horror. If you look at the Old Testament, that is a lot of horror. You got the Cain and Abel stuff going on in there. It's
absolutely
really dark. It's darker than most people realize, and the way that it exponentially takes off seems like it starts so slow with her just putting paint on the wall, right? And then the way that it just precipitates so out of control. I mean, again, we have a couple moving back into her husband's childhood home that had burned down, and they're renovating it. I'm not sure I'd caught that until I'd rewatched it with this focus on the move. But this is his old house. So this is kind of like a shell of him that she's trying to fill him up. And the way Mulholland Drive had that box representative of emptiness, she's trying to fill his emptiness and his empty void. And if you remember, he has this little like Cromdar gem.
Yeah.
And he's a writer too. He's a writer too in Mother.
That's very convenient for all of these films.
And this gem, I think, is supposed to be representative of like his creative spirit and his will to create and produce. And then you have
that makes sense.
Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer's really kind of obnoxious couples, the uninvited guests that show up and are supposedly fans of Javier Bardem's writer character, and then they break this Cromdar gem, and he shuts down his creative space. To me, it's just like the horror is not having purpose anymore, having like this sense of wanting something or creating, because then of course it becomes about the baby too. Do they want kids? Do they not want kids? And then she becomes essentially a Virgin Mary because it's insinuated that they are not having sex, but yet she still is then pregnant, pops out the baby that he then feeds to his fans because he can't come up with anything from his brain. So now he has to feed his actual viscera, It's so ridiculously layered and Old Testament-y. I think it's like one of the first movies that really just points to how horrific the Old Testament is in such a metaphoric way.
I just love that, certain movies you recommend to people might change their whole view on you.
For sure. And you got to give J-Law credit in this one because it's a character she hadn't done before. She's so demure in it. And it's strange that she's with this guy who's like 30 years older than her.
Yeah, the relationship is
really
definitely
played up. I just feel like the single location of this house, the house really like destroys her. The emptiness that house represents in her husband. Actually, when I was watching it, we were discussing whether or not all the characters were real or who was actually legitimately there and who wasn't. And if maybe I started to consider the possibility that these unwanted guests were people from his past, you know, like Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer. Could they have possibly been his parents?
Yeah, I was going to say, were they? Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know for sure. It just leaves a lot of possibility for interpretation. I feel like similar to Mulholland Drive, but with a little more focus and I think appeal to the mainstream than Mulholland.
I'd agree with that,
especially because of the cast too. That definitely helps. But oh my god, the smorgasbord of baby eating at the end. It's hard to.
It's hard to swallow.
I'm a huge fan of Mother.
I think there's just one left on our list, and it's something I haven't seen, and I thought I was going to see it, and then I totally forgot it, and I hadn't seen it.
Right, 2021 did have a couple. We mentioned it, Aftermath with Shawn Ashmore. You got a couple trying to get away from their past. She has cheated on him, so they need a new beginning. Now he has the opportunity to cheat on her, but then of course this house that they got for a steal has its own haunted past. What was it? Can you remind me like what was scary about the house? It was such a crap movie.
There was a murder in the house, and it was like the owner's. I think it was the owner's brother, and the owner had built the house to his specifications, which you find out later. That's the plot twist: is that there's some different things going on in the house.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
this was interesting. It was crap. When Shawn Ashmore is your top bill, there's probably issues. Even though I love him in The Boys, I'm glad his character is supposedly.
It's great in The Boys, yeah.
Yes, he fits for The Boys because that character's kind of Shawn Ashmore-y. But the other one from 2020, which I did watch, has Amanda Seyfried, and it's unique and it's definitely worth watching. Called Things Heard and Seen. Again, we have a couple moving to a new town because her husband has just gotten this new professorship. Turns out that the husband is kind of a skee-ball himself, and he's actually having an affair with the girl from Stranger Things, Natalie Dwyer. I think she's one of his students or something, or she goes to the school that he's the teacher at. Then it turns out
that's what
he
it is.
has gotten this job under false pretenses. He forged a recommendation letter, but then he starts to go Jack Nicholson in The Shining. He starts to lose it too and becomes murderous himself. I liked it. I would suggest watching it. I think it sounds like I liked it more than you like 13 Cameras in terms of the ones we hadn't seen, each of us. Right. Only because I think the performances are really good. Amanda Seyfried has grown on me a lot too since The Dropout, where she plays the girl from Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes. She's grown. I think she's kind of fearless in the roles that she takes, in the way that she's willing to be depicted, and I think that goes for Things Seen and Heard too. So it's definitely worth a look. The movie is scary, man.
It really is. Yeah, you just never know.
Prove the point.
I think you had a great idea with this episode. I think this is an overlooked genre. I mean, there's haunted house, and then there's like moving into a new house or new space.
Yeah, I don't think people really put it together that it is used so often.
Right.
And that ultimately new beginnings, a new place can be rife for setting the scene for scary.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and I'm not going to remember the name off the top of my head, but when we were talking about things we were looking forward to this year, there was a movie that I had picked off of a list that was about a couple moving into a new place and feeling unsafe. So I think we've got our new one coming out this year. I'll remember the name. Yeah. And
nice. Yes. We're gonna have to watch that. We should go back, and especially those Sundance ones that we talked about, because I saw
That's
that
what it was,
one
yeah.
about the witches, the transmogrifying
oh,
witches.
right. You saw
with
that.
Naomi
That's right.
Rapace. And I'd love to talk about that after you get a chance to look at it, because it was interesting. It was
All right.
worth a look. It was kind of like an emotion washed over me, a horrific emotion. It was very moody. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
But yeah, we can save that. Put a pin in that one.
I will check it out. And yeah, good to be back.
Hell yeah.
Oh, just lost my camera.
People. Stay alive. Stay alive, Chris.